Also had a packet of minutes from October 25th that were included for review. Do we have any changes to those which were not already submitted to staff for corrections?
Nope.
Hearing none, do we have a motion regarding the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. We have no items for the consent agenda tonight, so we'll move to the administrative session, which is an approval of the 2023 meeting schedule. You can find that in the packet after the minutes. We're meeting same as we were this month at 7 o'clock on Tuesdays. For most of the months we have two. There are a couple where we do just one. We are not, thankfully, meeting on February 14th. So you can all take that night off and, yeah, I don't know. It seems like a good idea.
You better remember it's something.
It's a good night to have off. I'm sure it'll be cold. We also have only one meeting in December. The second meeting would have been on the 26th of December, so good to take that one off, I think. But 2 in November, it's probably enough buffer between Thanksgiving and the 28th. Any concerns with the proposed meeting schedule for 2023? Okay, do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Okay, second?
Seconded.
This one we're going to do a roll call because we have everyone needing to mark whether they approved or denied. So,
Yes.
okay, Genevieve?
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm also a yes. So all of us who are present voted to approve the meeting schedule, so that is approved. Okay, next up is our legislative session, which includes a public hearing. It is for Unified Business Alliance requesting amendments to the Lakeside Landing Special Districts overlay. And for this, I am sure we have an extensive presentation from Mr. Yost.
You can always just move directly to the public hearing. I mean,
That's true, we could.
So most of you were here for, in one form or another, council or on the planning commission for Lakeside Landing, but our new commissioner is new to this, and it's been a while. So to remind us, we started working on real planning for Lakeside Landing after figuring out what we wanted to plan in June of 2020, and the result is this regulating plan, which you see on the right, zoomed out for the whole area, and then zoomed into the area to which the code currently applies. This is I-15 on the east, 400 south on the south, and 2600 west, or Spanish Fork Main Street at the west. So this is 5-star apartments directly across the street, and Love's with the McDonald's right here on the corner. The code was adopted last December, and then we added 15-acre addition, this piece here, to the area in January. And we're ongoing with development coordination. The area that's currently, the plan is currently applied to is entitled for, is 128 net developable acres, so it's more ground in terms of raw ground. It's almost 1,800 units and 130,000 square feet of commercial, and that's what the units is a maximum and the commercial is a minimum. So just to give you an update on where things are at with Lakeside, it's been a year and you may have seen a little bit of dirt move, but we're actually making a lot of progress. Davies Phase 1, or Unified Building Authority, Davies Design Build is a company under the Unified Business Alliance Unified Business Alliance umbrella, UBA umbrella, and they've submitted plans, a preliminary site plan application for their Phase 1, highlighted here in orange, containing just over 50,000 square feet of commercial and 126 residential units. This is a plat or a site plan drawing of that project. The next piece is on the east side of the project, and it's in civil design and has about 310 units with over 20,000 square feet of commercial. And this is a kind of preliminary look at what that area will come in at. That 15 acres that was added in January was eventually purchased by LGI Homes, and it's also in civil engineering process with almost 6,000 square feet of commercial and about 150 residential units. This 20 acres to the west is moving along in concept design with David Weekley Homes planning to take down that 20 acres with a design generally along this line, which all of them generally, all of them follow the regulating plan, but to see how they're actually setting out lots and orienting things is interesting for us as we move forward. So what we have on the drawing board in terms of application or things that are actively moving forward is almost 80,000 square feet of commercial and 724 residential units in these areas outlined in orange. These proposed amendments that we have for you tonight really represent a bunch of work over the past year on refining this code. You can never catch everything or capture all the necessary elements or get everything right in the first draft of a code. It's a really best that it's a living document, that it continues to evolve, and that evolution has really been pushed by the fact that now that we adopted a code, we actually got to work trying to make a development under that code and seeing what things broke, what things were unintended, what just straight mistakes we hadn't caught. And so that really brings three reasons for amendments that we've found as we've moved through. First is to correct errors in drafting, and there's a number of those. The second is to improve or facilitate the development or the implementation of the development, and those are really procedural issues. And then fill in regulatory gaps. There was elements that weren't as detailed or that we knew that we would deal with at some point, but we've come to the conclusion that they need to be included in the code so that they are enforceable and that everyone understands and has a clear common understanding of what the requirements are. The request that's before you is very much a result of collaboration. UBA, Lakeside Landing Partners, Pelona Architects and Urbanists, Corkett Onerin, the principal there, and staff have all worked together with administration, with other departments, and what you have before you really represents the unified recommendation and thorough collaboration of all those parties, including staff and administration in the city. So we can group the proposed amendments into three categories to analyze them. The first is lot type standards, so those standards that apply to the regulations for each type of building that can be built out in Lakeside. The second is parking lot design and thoroughfare standards, so parking lots and streets. And the third is procedural standards, how applications are handled, how entitlement happens. I have a slide for each of these, and I also have the PDF of this open if there are any questions. But we're going to go through them one by one just so that we all understand or at least have the opportunity to discuss them. The First Amendment falls into this category, or the reason for the First Amendment is an error. And this is specifically that on this cottage lot type, this front part of the building is listed as 6 feet, and this rear part of the building is listed at 12 feet, and it actually was supposed to be 6 feet. 12 feet makes it a one-car garage and pushes it back more with the middle wing of the building. They are supposed to be the same. It was just a mistake that a consultant made in drafting the code, and staff concurs with that and recommends that we approve that change.
So you're just talking about the green shaded area to the right of the garage area?
Yes, so this setback is equal to this setback, not double.
It used to be double, so you could only fit one car in where those triangles are.
Well, that's one.
So the middle zone is 16 feet, the front zone is 6 feet, and the back zone should be 6 feet.
Okay.
Any other questions on number one?
So with that, is that middle section a larger setback?
Yes, the middle section is 16 feet. So it essentially creates a wing or an L connecting the main body of the home to the garage,
Like a breezeway.
like a breezeway, or they're used for a lot of things: small studies, laundry, utility rooms, solariums, any number of uses. But it serves to break up the mass of the house to make it feel more articulated and less monolithic on that side elevation.
Thank you.
And that open side, this is the open side. The open side will always face the street. And an open side will always face another closed side, so that you're not both looking into the same side yard. The second is for these courtyard apartments, there is no rear zone listed in these setbacks. It's setbacks apply across the whole property, but this note was carried forward from another one of the lot types that does have a rear zone and doesn't permit living area in that rear zone. So basically it's saying in a part with like a garage with, on this is your rear zone. And this one may even have a note that says, this one doesn't have that, but some of them prohibit heated space or like occupiable space in the rear zone. But this apartment building doesn't have a rear zone. So that's just a mistake that needs to be fixed. That note needs to be removed.
So in places in the code where that language does exist, would it work to take out the word heated if you wanted to heat your garage? Because
Yes,
if you
that's why we
work
say
in
living
there-
floor area.
Okay,
A garage isn't considered living space by the building code.
right. So if that exists anywhere else, then I would love to see heated taken out of there so you can heat your garage.
Yeah, you definitely would be able to heat your garage.
Okay.
And this next one, number 3, is for this Main Street slot townhome. So it's basically a series of townhomes that is turned perpendicular to the street. And what this original requirement was down here, number 7, that the rear setback in this rear area of the lot, not this front zone, but the rear zone, for 50% of this property line has to be set back 15 feet, and the rest of it has to be set back 5 feet. After going through a lot of design and laying these out in different projects that you saw shown on the first slides, we realized that asking for that extra setback, essentially notching this out, reduces the usable floor area of these units and makes it less desirable for builders.
What is
and
the
that
current
they might not
usable
use it.
floor area with the?
So the maximum total floor area on this is 1,600.
But that's both levels, right?
Right. So you're essentially notching out on a 20. Let me see. Where are we at?
Like 800 square feet.
Well, I can tell you exactly. I just have to. Each one of these. So yeah, let's just take it at 20. So it's 10 by 10. So it's like 100 square feet. It's notched out of the back of the house, and makes the envelope more adds cost and makes the envelope more complicated.
I'm trying to remember why was this which one does this belong in of those 3 that you provided?
This is really a facilitate better development, because after going through this, a lot of the people that Corkit especially has been working with a lot of the groups to actually do real layouts, and we're concerned that people shy away from this one because it has that little bit of additional setback, and we'd like this to be used more.
Why are you guys neutral on it? Why is staff neutral? It makes sense to me, but I'm wondering why you're neutral. What am I missing?
Nothing. It's the neutral is essentially, yes, it would be good, but it's not. We're not carrying the water to the top of the hill for this one. We don't disagree with it.
And so these little notches, they all face like the rear.
Correct.
So none of them are street facing.
No, they all face interior lot lines.
So there's not going to be any change to the street facade.
No.
Articulation. Is that okay?
Any
And
additional
why were
questions?
the notches there?
That would be a Corkit question.
Okay. So that was the
Maybe they're
consultant.
to make little baby yards, I don't know.
Yeah,
A little spot for your dog to go out,
and
Put the grill out there.
maybe.
Well, they could still choose to do it. They
Yes.
just aren't compelled to do it
Yeah.
if we make this change, right?
correct.
I think Genevieve's question was a good one. As long as it's not facing that main street, doesn't seem like there's a problem with this.
Yeah, it wouldn't face a front street or a side street.
What do those rears have to look like since they face that little greenway? Does it matter? Are they just gonna,
Oh, the common walkway to the adjoining units.
yeah, do we have any, like,
There are
design
standards, yes.
Okay.
And this is also showing where two of them would be placed next to each other, and they don't necessarily have to be placed next to each other because the minimum street frontage is just 59 feet, which would be like one of
It's not
these.
very wide, yeah.
This is just showing what the condition would be like if you did line them up next to each other. So these could abut any number of lot types that are permitted in the same transect.
Okay, thank you.
But it wouldn't affect any of the standards in that walking area.
No.
Okay.
No. This one, number 4. This is essentially the tallest of the townhome lots, but types, but it's a small lot. There's a couple of builders in Daybreak that have built a narrow townhome, and it's at 14 feet wide. And so there was a request by some builders working with some of the northern property owners to reduce this to 14 feet to accommodate that type of product. Just in the areas where it's permitted, and it's only permitted in the T5, T5I, and T6, so the central, more intense transects is not permitted out in the more single-family or single-family attached areas. We were concerned about this in that there wasn't any additional criteria provided for when it could be used or how many of them could be used, and that felt without that specific criteria they might get overused to the exclusion of other unit types. So we were fine keeping this type at a 20-foot width. Any questions on that?
So the benefit is it just adds an additional unit. Is that how it works?
No, the unit count is set, but it may allow you to have a bigger lot on an adjoining property. Allows you to kind of move around how you're allocating those lots.
Okay,
And it provides, could provide, even though I'm continually astounded at what people are coming up to try to fit in Westfield Central to provide an affordable townhouse option, but when there's a 3-story cottage at Westfield Central, like in the mid 500s, I question the usefulness of our efforts to provide zoning that enables affordable housing.
So Josh, who actually recommended this
This came from
Builder?
from
UBA or?
from Lakeside Landing Partners or Glen Lent, the Alpine Development.
Okay.
They have. There's actually, I don't think any of these units are actually used in UVAs, at least in their first phase.
Okay.
What's the height requirement on these?
It's a good question. Let's go back. These are 4 stories or 50 feet max. So these are tall. Then Daybreak, one of the groups that builds these, calls them sky homes because they have. This is kind of what Lafferty was getting at in Westfield Central, was a smaller but tall townhome with rooftop decks. Any additional questions on that?
So, looking at your staff's comments, without specific criteria for the implementation of this, is that not here because they haven't drawn it up yet? Or, I mean, because it seems to me if this proposal is being brought to the table, then all the detail should be in there already.
Yeah.
Yeah, really all the proposal on this was to change this number from 20 to 14. Not anything about where any additional limitations to how often it could be applied or how many of them could be next to each other or
What impact it would have on the overall
right.
look
That
and
wasn't,
feel.
that wasn't discussed in the back and forth.
It definitely was.
What criteria
Honestly,
might
the
be?
applicant, this is not a vitally important request from the applicant. It would be nice, and we've had a developer ask for it, but it's not on the top of the pile by any means.
Okay. I don't have any more questions on that one.
One of the things when you go that high with a four-story building, making it narrow just allows the square footage over 4 floors, not to get too extreme. Otherwise, the engineers have quite a different price. Because you have 20-foot wide on the ground, so you have like the same height. When you're trying to get, when you look at the heights, so all of a sudden you've got more quantity of square footage in each unit, trying to get your height.
Yeah.
Because you're not as narrow on the ground. So that's kind of the element of that. We're not building any of them, you know, it's just what you have.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons it can be asked
Understood.
for. Like in ours, where we have additional, we're just kind of agreeable that it can make it better if you want it, but we're not.
Basically saying it's a huge place versus an affordable housing place,
It's just
relatively
lesser-
speaking.
Lesser square footage per unit can be
Yeah.
applied at this type of product.
You could also knock a floor off.
Hey,
Yeah. You just make it 3 stories.
no, I understand. You're explaining, no, you explained a critical point. Hey, Josh, one
Yes.
other question. I thought I was finished, but this brought it up. How does this impact our design standards?
It doesn't.
Well, it seems like it kind of would, wouldn't it?
But we have like
The
parking.
design standards require a certain type of lot diversity, a certain amount of lot diversity per block face, and then have specific architectural standards for different types of units, and you would apply the architectural standards to townhomes.
They were developed for a 20-foot wide.
No, they were developed for broader categories than that. For townhomes, for single-family homes, for other types of things. Now, if we're talking about the one that we spent a lot of time with at the end of the process with council, that pattern book, that pattern book doesn't apply to these lot types. That only applies to the multifamily product that the UBA is dealing with primarily. So yes, that if it was a change to those, it
The
would
objective
be.
here is to have a reduced priced unit. That's what you were saying earlier, I think, right?
Yes.
Would this, would the more narrow 14 feet still allow for parking
It would
on
either
that
be
first
tandem
level?
or one
be
in a
tandem.
garage, one surface. I mean, if you were in
They can fit tandem? 7 and 7? I don't know.
no tandem, one in front of the other.
Oh, got it. Yes, sorry.
Yeah. If you were in Italy and you were driving your little, Fiat, you probably could pull it off. But
We don't have a livable space requirement on this type?
in terms of in the front of the building,
Yeah.
we don't because of the way it's set up. Because the minimum lot depth is
So they wouldn't be
So-
able to do tandem and only have garage on the first floor?
no, they wouldn't. Let me do the math. So divide 1,400 by 20 for me. 70.
Yeah.
So they've got to be, they're 70-foot deep lots with a front setback of like 10 feet. So you
15.
got 60 feet. So you'd at least still have 40 feet left of, I'm not 40. You'd still have 20 feet left of building if you did a tandem on the ground.
Okay.
So does this get? I understand the reason for the reduction in size, but does this create more green space or what? I mean,
It could. Yeah, it definitely could because
if
you've
we don't
got,
increase the units, but we decrease the size of the units, there would be a little bit more.
yeah, because the
open
number of
space,
units is
right?
fixed. so that you may end up with a good designer allocating a little more space into a mid-block greenway or something. But
Or it could be put into a larger lot size somewhere
yeah, a larger
else.
lot size for another type. It does give more options to a designer. It's like the difference between going and trying to buy bread at 7-Eleven versus Smith's. Got a lot more options.
Okay. I think I'm finished with that.
Number 5. This is simply changing.
I do have more.
Okay.
Sorry.
Just kidding.
I kind of asked this earlier, but when we talk about specific criteria, I'm trying to think of the negatives that come out of this. And maybe I'm not cynical enough, but when we talk about specific criteria, I mean, do you see some negatives that could come out when the specific criteria would hit the ground, or do you think? I mean, I'm trying to figure out. We've got a set number of doors, right? If these are just smaller, what's the negative that would come out of this?
Philosophically, from my perspective, if the market thinks that that's something somebody wants to buy,
Yeah.
I don't see a overly compelling reason in terms of public health, safety, and welfare to say no. I don't want anybody living in a 14-foot wide unit.
Yeah.
It's more of an impact on overall urban design character, and we're happy to take a different recommendation to the council than what we've made to you on this one, without any hesitation.
Now, did Corkett do this piece as well?
Yes, he essentially came through him via Glenlant.
Okay.
Do you know of any criteria so if these exist in Daybreak, that Daybreak has instituted to help control
Well, Daybreak
the
is
use of
kind of
this
an
type?
entirely different monster because they're a master developer landowner. So they say, we want this here, and a builder says, I want to build out there, and they just get to decide. They aren't subject to any of the land use application process that we are.
So they don't have
As long as it fits under their master development
Template
agreement
for
with
us.
South Jordan, they could tell A, B, or C builder yay or nay for no defensible reason. So
Do you know
they-
why Glenn chose to not send a representative here?
I don't. I don't. I can't see into his thoughts on that one.
I will mention that he said if I have an opportunity to speak on his behalf, I'll is welcome to. We talk a lot, but the only thing I would say here, asking this question, just so I can do that justice to him, is when you recommend, Josh, that you think it'll be overused, is there a way to limit the worry about overuse?
Yeah. What?
Sure.
I mean, you could have went for it, but
Yeah.
that seemed to be the concern that I saw, is that it might be overused.
Yeah.
So how do we manage that concern if that product type were to actually add to diversity as long as it wasn't overused?
Right.
But if it's used too significantly, it might reduce diversity.
And we essentially put their prerogative on the applicant on this
And they
one.
didn't
That if you want to come with
provide
some
things.
additional things to help us feel comfortable, we'd love to entertain that. And there just hasn't been any additional discussion on that. But I'm
So they
also
might be able to bring it back later, just that part, if they really wanted to.
perhaps, yeah. I mean, they always have the ability to apply. And again, if you look at this and don't see a big downside, we're happy to afford you will definitely have the opportunity, and I should have told you at the end of this, the neutrals are not no's, and we expected that most of those you'd probably feel comfortable with. So at the end, we're going to have a table up and go down each one, and you can indicate how you'd like to move on that. And there is no, I will go home and try to watch actually, no, I have to go. I was going to go home and watch something, but I'm scheduled for
The game
Christmas
ended
music
earlier,
rehearsal.
And you essayed
So.
one.
Oh, I went home for
but they're
that.
Not,
Okay.
they're not limited to waiting a year if we.
Oh, no,
plan
that's
it.
only for zone map amendments.
Okay.
Josh, I think our high council advisor has a question. or an
She's
issue.
on the high council.
Oh, hi, Liz. I mean,
Yeah.
technically, we typically do a
As-
staff presentation, and then we
And do the public.
have applicants and.
But it,
It's a little of a question.
But
are
it's
you
really
speaking
Karen's
as a
meeting.
city council member, or are you speaking as a member of the public?
but if we're allowing a developer to talk during the meeting, we ought to allow the city council to talk.
Okay.
It just depends on if it's coercive.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can give you time after and just do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd love to hear the why during the public hearing.
Yeah, because we will have a public hearing, but there's no one here from the public, so it doesn't really matter which order we do things in, but we can officially recognize you if you'd like.
It's a shame the developer's not here to kind of even show us some pictures that the builder referred to up in,
I could show you some
Daybreak.
pictures. You want to see some pictures?
We had a little, wasn't there like a little mock-up?
Well, there's
Daybreak.
just for this this lot type. There's an example massing,
that
but
one,
I can
yeah.
also show you pictures of these units as well if
a
you
20
want.
foot versus a 14 foot. I'd love to see the
We can scroll around a
aesthetic
little bit.
difference.
Okay.
Have we seen those when we've gone to Daybreak for
I've driven up a
different things?
few times. I don't remember.
I mean, I know as a commission we haven't gone to Daybreak, but at
No.
what
I don't know that
APA
you'd necessarily
conferences?
look at them and be like, "Oh, that's a 14-foot townhome."
Yeah.
I can tell you that we got the measuring tape out and we put it in our front room, which is staircase, hallway, living room, and from the wall over, it was 14 feet was the staircase, the hallway, and about a couch.
Is this 14
That's 14
feet inside or 14 feet from outer?
This is
edge to
lot
outer
width,
edge?
so this
14
is
wide.
like
Lot width?
yes,
So then what's the setbacks? There's no setbacks.
0 setbacks.
So-
I mean, on the
Setback
street there is
doesn't
on
change.
the
I'm just saying, let's take a 20 footer and make it a 14
yeah.
footer.
So this is exterior
Exterior
Well,
wall to wall.
on a exterior if it's an end unit
Well, yeah.
yeah.
But to property line.
Property line to property line. This is not interior dimension.
So, like, with insulation and drywall and whatnot, you're not getting 14 feet inside of the building.
No, not if you go to 14.
I've decided.
And they also they don't have to take it down to that. I don't know, how that design works. I can show you some pictures if you're interested. But I'm kind of at the position from a philosophical standpoint. If somebody thinks that's something somebody will buy, then people buy Fords. I don't buy Fords, but if somebody wants a 14-foot townhome, sorry, Brett.
I just bought my first Ford, and it is
Go in a
awesome.
minute.
That Raptor is awesome, man.
Oh well, it's a Raptor.
Different.
You gonna take it to Alaska?
Does anybody need to see a picture of any
No.
of them?
Okay.
Okay, then it sounds like we can skip that part.
Perfect. All right, this next one is really simple. It's changing this from 1.5 stories to 2 stories, but not changing the overall 32-foot max. These liner buildings are really employed very commonly in. Forgive me.
Oh, I
I'm going to
remember
scroll
these.
back and pick up a drawing just to show you. I should have put this in. I
Are
didn't
these
think
the,
of it.
the funny little ones that are like kind of in the middle of the parking lot?
Kind of, yes.
On the edge?
Yes. So
Uh-huh.
these are liner buildings. These A's are liner buildings, and they basically just shield the parking lot from. Maintain the street edge and shield the parking lot from the sidewalk, the streets, and they're usually located in areas where you have intense development. They're not permitted out by single-family houses, even though they're not taller than a single-family house. So keeping those at 1.5, we kind of looked at that and said, well, if we've got a 4-story apartment building over here, a 4-story office building, I don't think a 2-story is a problem, especially since it doesn't change the numerical.
Can you show the specs page for that?
Yeah, I'll be right back to that.
So the overall height doesn't change, it's just
No.
what you're able to fit on the inside.
Yep.
Number of windows on the outside.
Correct. How you configure it, because there's a very specific definition of half-story in this code, which is basically the amount of area of that floor which can be at a building code minimum head height. So it's, so there's a very specific criteria here, but with it being a 2-story, you could take that. You wouldn't have to keep the second story in the roof, essentially, or make it smaller if it was a flat roof building.
Mm.
Any questions on that one? I think that was the easiest one. So we recommend approval on that one. This was actually a really interesting one. We originally envisioned this as being kind of the pad site or the convenience store that would end up kind of around the edges or on major roads, and that it would, have its own parking lot, and it, would be that kind of use. But then we thought, well, what if somebody on Lakeside on kind of the main street wants to build just a single-story small commercial building? Either as like a first building to kind of test the market, like we have here in Springville. There was a smaller building where the Reynolds building was before it was built. Or just to be able to have like a small coffee shop or a little cafe or a professional office just slotted in on a diverse streetscape on the Lakeside Main Street. This would really be the only single-story building that would end up in there, and it would provide a lot more granularity and diversity than it would if you maintained a 70-foot minimum street frontage. So this is essentially saying we don't need street frontage or lot size or depth for this, as long as it meets the building code. If you want to slot a little building in somewhere, that's totally workable. And we feel really positive about this because it's much easier to get a granular mix of uses if you can use this building in more places instead of just kind of out on the perimeter where it's more commercial. And everybody loves the McKay Diamond store on Main Street in Salt Lake, so narrow storefronts are great.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I've never seen that building.
So not everybody loves it.
Well, they don't know that they love it
Yeah,
yet.
you know, I love it.
Now we need a survey.
Or I mean, it's
Field trip.
really so many of the buildings we have in downtown. The H&R Block across the street, the old Herald building.
Lemon and Sage would have.
Well, Lemon and Sage, yeah, could be, because these can go to a second story.
Mm-hmm.
Or a bunch, where the Retreat is, or the UPS store.
Okay.
It provides that kind of flexibility, because there was no minimum lot size or lot width when those were built, and people built what they needed and evolved over time. So we thought this was a good Corkett had a good idea, a good catch here.
Okay.
Any questions or thoughts on this? Okay. Next, when we first got into this, especially working with UBA, there was really not an idea that we would structure parking in this project, that both the revenue side of the pro forma and the expense side of the pro forma told us that, hey, we're probably not going to end up with structured parking here. But when the parking requirement was negotiated up to a bit higher than what was originally proposed here, it created additional demand for parking. So it to keep the same number of units, you have to come up with the area you're going to have to structure parking. And it also, UBA is proposing, and we'll get to this later, some office space in a more substantial form than we thought they would, that would also utilize potentially some parking garages. So we just wanted to have a sheet in here that told us how to do parking garages, so they didn't end up right against the street or something. And this basically says it can't be on a
Just
street.
in case.
Yes, this is and we actually in UBA's design we have 2 standalone parking garages so far.
Would they be private? parking, or would it be public?
It all
parking?
depends on how they structure that and where they assign the parking. But there's a lot of commercial, and so I would anticipate that unless they put all the residents in there and mark everything else as the visitor parking for the businesses and the park, that these would probably be mixed. But it's definitely a management question where you want to put who.
So with these being able to butt up to another building, what if that other building type has setbacks? Do we waive the setbacks?
No, the
Is
other
that
building
right?
setbacks, so setbacks always go from the property line of that building to the building. So if you have a 0 setback, but the building next to you has a 10-foot setback, they're still 10 feet away
They're still
from you.
10 feet away. Okay, so it doesn't change that.
Yeah, and the really key part here is that there's no street frontages permitted for these, so they can't be on a green street, they can't be on a main street or on a vehicle street, and that they have to be at least 50 feet away from any street right of way.
And they can't be on a green street either, huh?
Yeah, so that's a street, it just
Yeah.
doesn't have cars in it, so they can't be on any thoroughfare.
So, like, this diagram has 3 sides where it says parking drive, but the 4th side doesn't say anything. And that couldn't be on a green street either.
Correct. That could not be on a green street. They really would be used on the interior of blocks behind buildings. And that 50-foot really means you're going to put some type of unit between it and any street.
And can that first level be below grade, or
Theoretically, yes, but practically no.
because over there with the flooding stuff
Yeah.
and whatnot, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it would be a sail in, sail out. Any questions
Sure,
on that
there's
one?
some sort of business model in that.
Well, there's
I come from
Landing
Lake
Park,
County in
RV.
Illinois. There's a lot of boat parking,
there's a
boat drive-throughs.
Venice, it's just Venice.
Yes.
you know. We've got some active transportation options coming right up. Row your boat.
Oh, look at the People Canal in
Yeah.
Amsterdam, right?
We can do this.
Okay. I have no further questions.
Any other clever anecdotes?
But,
Rub a
good
dub
breakup.
dub? I don't know.
So this is a big one. This is the parking standards, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to the parking layouts sheet and walk you through this. The first takeaway I want to make sure everyone is clear with is that this does not reduce required parking. It doesn't make stalls smaller. It just changes how space is allocated in a stall. So we'll go through that. But this
It's
is
like a Tetris situation.
it's like a Tetris situation, or if you're going to have a bumper hangover, and we'll get into that, you can have it hang over some landscaping instead of more concrete.
Okay.
So this first, as you're familiar or should be familiar, and I should explain it, anything in italics is simply explanatory or context language. It's not regulatory. So in this first page, Corkit is explaining why flat edge curbs are good in a parking situation, because they make it so you can actually pull up farther and make it easy to have stormwater management that's more efficient by letting the water just sheet flow off of paved areas into landscaped areas. And interestingly, there are 2 places in Provo where this is employed. One is at where Brett's familiar with it, behind New Skin, the 100 South from Freedom all the way to the post office is a 0 curb street. So that street sheet flows just straight into the landscaping on both sides, and then there are
Never noticed.
stormwater overflow boxes in both of those sides that if it raises up to a certain point, then it goes down the drain. If not, it just soaks into the ground. And in the Provo Frontrunner station, all of those landscaped islands are at, or the majority of them are at grade, and the water just flows into those and really helps with stormwater and reduces the amount of pavement you need to build a parking lot. Because you can use that top of the curb as part of your space of your length of your stall, instead of it being 6 inches up and having additional 6 inches compounded by however many banks of parking you have.
Just a clerical, with these pages, are they all new, or there's
These
parts
pages
of
are
them
all
that-
new.
They're all new, okay.
Yes,
That's, I just clarify that, thank you.
correct. Sorry, these pages are all new. That's why, so that we didn't mess up our internal referencing system or make conflicts in what how the development agreement cites this document, we've taken to the kind of uncomfortable but workable solution or convention of putting sub-page numbers.
Page
So this is
numbers,
now
okay.
93A.
With the planter island, whatever they were called in that document, would that be maintained by the HOA?
Yes, all these are in private parking lots. It doesn't affect any public thoroughfares. We just have standards in our existing code, and the way this works is if Lakeside Landing Special District Overlay is silent about something, then we default to what the code says otherwise. And our code otherwise has parking standards within it. So this is essentially adopting a series of parking standards for Lakeside that supersede the general city parking standards, which admittedly need work.
Will this set a precedent for other areas that may say, hey, I want to change ours?
I hope it will set a precedent for us to take a close look at our parking standards ourselves. If you go over to Fox Ridge, the new project on the old West Side Elementary School site, and go behind the last buildings or the newest buildings on the west side, if you come in on 7th and just keep going, you'd run into those buildings. Go behind there. There is a 670-foot long uninterrupted parking lot back there with no landscaping islands in it, except where the driveways come into it. It is not great. And so that's just an example I've just had, kind of been confronted with as to why our parking standards could use some work.
Okay.
But as with a lot of things you'll see in here, Public Works or Administration was comfortable with a lot of these recommendations because although they may result in public clamor or political pressure to, hey, Lakeside has this great thing, we'd like it too, that it's still entirely in the legislative arena that the council would have to change the code to make these things applicable to other areas of the city. Doesn't mean people won't be jealous. I hope they'll be jealous because it's going to be great. So the first, each of these drawings is really what's regulatory here. And what this one is essentially saying is that you have a 20-foot parking space, but a foot of that can hang over into landscaping. So it essentially narrows your pavement width from 64 to 62. And these are technical in that really the only difference between these two is that this has a center drainway where the whole thing slopes to the middle. And then this next one has 2 drainways at the back of each of the parking aisle.
So there's no runoff into the green area?
Not in these, no.
Even though it talked about that in the...
Right, so there could be. He's just providing examples of how you would deal with drainage on 2 sides or drainage in the middle.
But these aren't the only options.
These aren't the only options.
Okay.
And this actually is one that would drain out off the edge, so you would drain into a drainway here and then drain off the edge. And this is essentially the same configuration, just with an aisle and parking only on one side. The next one is showing how tandem would work, because we reference tandem a lot, but don't really have a lot of discussion of it in our existing city code. So this gives us a tandem on one side and a tandem on one side and single on the other side arrangement. And then this is for very narrow spaces, and this is where this is you'll see this is a non-italicized portion, because this is a condition we really want to avoid as much as we can, but in some instances where things are tight, it is useful, and that is this head-in parking with attached sidewalks and no curbs, basically where you don't have the landscape hanging over and your bumpers are hanging over into that sidewalk area. And this is really can only be used when buildings are close to the driveway, and it can't be used where the buildings are 30 feet or farther from the driveway or the alley. So you couldn't use it in like a surface parking lot. You could only use it in an alley, like right behind somebody's house. So it's not going to
Would that be a public thoroughfare?
No. The alleys are privately owned, and this would be actually off of the alley itself. Is that the borders of the alley actually run down the driveway, and the parking areas on each side would be private. So it's basically if you had a garage at the front of the alley, and then you had like this
So if
picture
somebody
down here.
smacks their knee on a bumper because somebody decided to have their car hanging
Right.
out 36
It's
inches.
it's your visitors in your backyard, yeah. So these you could have a garage coming out to the edge of the alley, and then instead of having a garage, you could have a surface spot where you can pull up over it.
What, is there any consideration for, like, in that picture, it's a truck, but it's not backed in, but many people back in.
Yeah, and that gets
And
problematic.
if they have a long bed truck, then that could cover the sidewalk. Anything to,
What happens at?
Yeah, who
church buildings
enforces
also?
this? The HOA or the city?
This is not our property, not our territory. It's just that we have standards that tell people how to build parking lots, so they wanted to come in and.
'Cause I think this. I think
so
that
if
thing's
somebody,
workable.
if somebody's doing that repeatedly and the neighbors are mad about it, they would go to the HOA. and
Or
complain.
the HOA or the manager, if it's, depending on what type of product you're in.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is not one we anticipate would be employed very often. And it's the one that I'm least excited about.
The other ones that have the green space there, they don't have wheel stoppers?
They do.
They do have wheel stoppers? Oh, okay, good.
Well,
They don't show them in the
No.
picture, so.
it doesn't show them. The hope there, and this is something that the people that build and maintain these parking lots have to deal with, is that people will be judicious about not pulling into the landscaping, but then so many of the vehicles we drive today have such extensive front blind zones that that's also problematic. But they definitely could employ them if they wanted to, because there's room to do that. They've just not shown on the drawing, and there's nothing that's in the regulatory language that says you could or couldn't.
I'm trying to remember how deep are one of these private. Do we call them an alley?
So an alley
Isn't there just like 3 units in an alley or something like that?
no. Let me show you the regulating plan. Actually, let me show you this page that tells you what streets are which. Close your eyes if you.
You start having a seizure.
Yeah. So these are fire alleys. So these are the alleys that are 24 feet wide with 20 feet of pavement to provide fire access for fire operations. So you could have little head-in parking coming off of these, like you can see in this area. There's little head-in parking or little mid-block parking, so your visitors wouldn't have to park out on the street and then walk down the greenway to get to you. They could park behind your house in the alley. And then this next page is the standard alleys, which are 20 feet of right-of-way and 16 feet of pavement. You may be thinking of some of like the common courts.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah. And you couldn't have parking in the front of those. That parking would need to be at the rear.
I understand why it's private. All right.
Well, in these parking situations where we have the concern about the overhang, if you have a landscaping border right directly between the pedestrian walkway and the parking stall, the shrubs, trees, whatever, you can keep that overhang from going onto the public walkway.
Yeah, and you just have more room.
We could just also
To
do
begin with.
grass, right? I mean, do we have a requirement for there to be shrubs?
I'd have to go back to the landscaping section. There's a whole section on that to see how that would work. But generally, we wouldn't want, and somebody like Corkwood wouldn't put grass in anything probably narrower than 8 feet.
Yeah.
It's
As a maintenance.
well, maintenance, water wasting. Yeah, it's very hard to efficiently irrigate narrow patches of grass.
Do we have anything, you don't know off the top of your head if we have anything prohibiting grass within?
No, we'd have to go over and scroll through the landscape standards section.
Yeah, I don't remember what we talked about back then.
And then there was some concern, as I saw UBA's initial site plan over here. That there was parking areas that were visible from the street, and that the street wall was kind of getting broken up and feeling kind of suburban to me. And so to help address that concern, Corkit came up with a standard for screening surface parking along the street that says you can only have a 12-foot setback between the edge of the right-of-way and the parking for 70 feet of a block, and everywhere else it's got to be at least 30 feet back. So it gives you, one, with that, at 30 feet, it really pushes you to put a unit there if you can, or it provides for a good landscape buffer. And it actually, down here, talks about the minimum landscape island and how much landscaping needs to be included in there based on the shrub point system that's established in the landscape standards. So it tells us how big they've got to be, how much landscaping there has to be in there, and that there can't be any surface parking period at all within 12 feet of the street right of way.
So, do we have a visual representation of what that means? 'Cause
Yeah, so here there's surface parking,
yeah,
and it's adjacent to the right of way. It can't be closer than 12. It can't be closer than 30 feet for more than 70 feet in block length. If there's more parking than 70 feet exposed on a block face, it has to be set back at least 30 feet. So these are these areas here, 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 where parking is exposed to the street. It's not located behind a building. It's essentially in a side yard. or a separate
so,
lot.
like, if we imagine between lot 2 and lot 3, there in the center,
That is
that-
a pedestrian green street.
that pedestrian green street, but if that was parking instead, there would be that big of a buffer between, or maybe not that big, but there would be just a larger buffer for 70% of the,
No, so there would be anything if that width exceeded 70 feet, or you can be at 12 feet back, but only for 70 feet in length. So this
oh, okay.
this parking bay right here is probably about 64 feet wide.
So it could
So
be
it could be 12
12
feet
feet.
back
back.
minimum.
So it wouldn't actually change anything along this strip.
No, this is designed to this submission reflects that proposed amendment.
Oh, it reflects the proposal. This isn't
Yes.
before.
No.
This is after.
This is the actual current application, which complies with the code as was proposed to be amended.
Okay.
So just for reference, the stall width is 9 to 10 feet wide, and so you can see these are all at least a stall wide, and if they weren't, they'd need to be. And that's something we check as we go through site plan. So that is, oh, and here, as I mentioned, if it's closer than 20 feet, an opaque fence, at least 5 feet tall, has to be, and a maximum of 6, because we don't want it to be so tall that it's a visual, really intimidating, has to be installed along the parking spaces, and that's on the parking lot side, and then a landscape island is on the street side, so it would go sidewalk, landscaping, fence, or wall, where it's closer than 20 feet to the sidewalk.
What
So-
is the standard width of a sidewalk in developments right now?
5 feet.
5 feet? Okay.
So you'd have at least a sidewalk width inside of the sidewalk of landscaping before a fence.
Wait. So they can have it 12 feet back, but if it's closer than 20 feet to the sidewalk, then they have to have a fence?
Correct.
So if, for that whole 12 feet, for that whole length that is 12 feet from the street right of way, there's a fence
Yes.
there? Okay.
It's a bunch of overlapping criteria. I should have put together a diagram. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least a differential tree that we could follow down if you're closer then. So on this drawing, all these areas
There's a fence.
where there would be fencing and landscaping.
Do we want that to be that inaccessible? Is that gonna create these like non-walkable friendly streets?
That's my concern with, and it's really the fact that there's not an active frontage there or a building front there that's my biggest concern. And if there's not a building front there, we want to do all we can to hide the parking and maintain a continuous and comfortable street edge there with the landscaping. We don't want to just have be walking along, having the street wall go away. That makes you feel uncomfortable as a pedestrian. That all of a sudden there's just empty void there.
Yeah.
So having that landscaping and fence to define the edge of the street is helpful where we don't have a building. There will still be, it doesn't preclude having walkways, like you've got a walkway here, walkways on a number of these other side areas.
There's access points.
Yes.
Okay. So it'd be like between the toy store and the Christopher's, that there's that alley there. You wouldn't have an alley. You would have a sidewalk. I mean, a fence.
Oh, the vacant lot
Yeah,
there?
the vacant
Yeah, you
lot.
would have
A fence.
at least 5 feet of landscaping and a 5 foot to 6 foot fence.
So it
there.
wouldn't be just a. Oh.
Wouldn't be
cool.
just a parking lot.
Okay.
It would be very similar to, actually I probably should go to Google. It would be very similar to what we have here on the west side of our campus, which I would love to transition over the decades to actual buildings, but right now it's parking. This is a similar situation where we've created a landscape setback, and then here we don't actually have a fence. We've just used bushes, but visually it has the,
Create a fence. I see.
yeah. And then there's, the walkways through. Any questions on those parking lot standards?
I think the only concern that I have is this section of both the bumper and encroachment, just going back to that, allowing the sidewalk to be sized narrower, 4 feet is advised. I'm a little concerned that we may be getting or allowing for the building of sidewalks that are too narrow for two people to comfortably walk together down the street. And we're trying to build a community that encourages walking
Right.
and neighbor interactions, but if the sidewalk's too narrow for two people, then we've eliminated a lot of those interactions.
Right.
That's a good point.
Keep in mind that, and this is an argument for or against, that these are just along parking areas. They're not the sidewalks in front or down greenways or down green streets. They're just kind of the internal circulation in the parking lot or on the edge of an alley. And generally, alleys don't have sidewalks, even if you have a surface parking next to it. So this just provides, like, if you had a back door and you didn't have a garage there and you had just a walkway to get to the parking, that's kind of the configuration we're talking about here. It wouldn't be used. These sidewalks wouldn't take the place of the primary pedestrian circulation through the area. But you just said something about 4 feet.
Mhm.
Where did you see that?
Under the heading allowing bumper encroachments, there's a picture of a red shed-looking thing next to it, right there. Yep.
Page
The 2 to 4 feet in
93A.
parentheses, planting strip in between, and then the 4 feet that is advised is underneath, about 2 lines.
So, again, this is
It's italicized.
italicized, so it's not regulatory.
Okay.
Down here, again, italicized and not regulatory, but called out here, 5-foot sidewalk each side. This says the sidewalk needs to be at least 5 feet wide when attached because the bumper of the car is permitted to encroach to the sidewalk up to 12 inches. And that's explaining this drawing, showing that, and this drawing requires a 5-foot sidewalk each side.
Okay.
So there's no provision there for it to go to 4 feet.
This is a little hard to separate what we're looking at approving versus what is,
What is talked about is
yeah.
reference to how things could be done.
I agree
Yes,
with that.
yes.
Like, wait, which part?
It's like, to me, it's like the Torah and the Talmud. One's the scripture, and the other one is people talking about the scripture. So all this italicized stuff is the people talking about the scripture.
Okay.
So, like in page 93B, in the bottom section, well, actually, in both pictures, there's that 1 foot. That means a 1 foot.
Maximum overhang.
Oh, that's the overhang. Okay.
Yes.
Did you just put like the little wheel stopper thing far enough back that you would only be able to get 1 foot? Or how do you?
That's a good question. I read it as saying you can only include 1 foot of your 20-foot parking space as part of the planner. More
So
of a measurement
can-
thing than a practical.
It has to be at least 19
It
feet.
has to be at least 19 feet.
Okay.
And we don't have any regulations on this sidewalk then.
On
the
these
little
where
people
it's
are
detached
standing on,
sidewalks, no. The only one that says specifically what the sidewalk needs to be is,
Do they even have to have a sidewalk?
no, they don't. This is all private parking lots, so they don't have to have a sidewalk.
There's no ADA requirements.
Well, they would need to provide access, an accessible path from an ADA stall to a building to meet, the the ADA guidelines, the ADAGs. But other than that, it's the same requirements that apply at Walmart or Smith's. Which is another reason why our parking standards need to be updated. Any additional questions on that? Now this is a big one. This is thoroughfare standards, and this is just a picture of the map over here on the right, and I'm going to go back to the PDF. This falls squarely into the category of regulatory gaps. We adopted some changes, or before adoption, we made some changes to the street standards based on a review by our active transportation consultant, Alta Planning and Design. And so those were adopted, but what we didn't have yet is recommendations for intersection treatments. And one of the most important elements of an active transportation network of, safe walking and biking is intersections. You can't just give up at the intersection, otherwise you have a bunch of disconnected facilities and it's hard to get anywhere. So Alta provided us with this intersection guidance after the adoption of the plan, as with a lot of drawings and example images. And these first pages of this document are all that italicized writing, which essentially just provides examples of how each of these elements are implemented, from how to deal with turning radii, and up here, this is actually important. Again, not regulatory, but communicating what we want to have happen with this. That these are all illustrative and shouldn't be literally translated to intersections without engineering analysis and design. So none of these are actually standard drawings. They are examples of how to employ these strategies. And then at the end of the document, it says that map you saw on the slide shows where each strategy needs to be implemented. So in here we have a number of kind of a menu of elements that we use to create intersection treatments, ranging from raised crossings, bike lane extensions, phased bicycle left turns or bike boxes, intersections, how to deal with intersections of bike boulevards, toucan crossings. You've seen them in Provo on 3rd South and 5th West. They're called toucan crossings because toucan cross. Bikes and pedestrians, but not cars. And then we have warning signage. These are different types of traffic control at those bicycle boulevards. And rectangular rapid flashing beacons is what we have here in front of City Hall and up on Canyon before Red Devil. Also have hybrid beacons, and somewhere in here we even had a hawk crossing, which is more of a full signalized crossing for pedestrians and bikes. Also have indications or examples of traffic circles, raised crossings, curb extensions or bulb outs, and refuge islands for pedestrian crossings of larger streets. Now this drawing on the right is actually, and this second column on page 93N are the actual regulatory elements of this section. This is saying that all of these things we've talked about in this document shall be constructed and designated, constructed as designated on this map.
Yeah.
And that, again, engineering judgment, it needs to be executed. And this map is actually pending a couple tweaks that we will get done before we get to council, just as we've met internally with our engineering department, public works, to designate each of these intersections functionally, so that we make sure we're getting traffic in and out of here properly, as to which one's going to be the toucan crossing, which one's going to be an enhanced crossing. And it's actually nothing changes from this. I think one may flip, but we're just providing additional designation so that it's clear which of these intersections is a full movement intersection, which one is a roundabout, which one is a toucan, or which one is, just a right in, right out, or an unsignalized intersection. So those are just a couple technical things. We still need to edit this actual source document to add a couple numbers here. But this is the document, the map that tells everybody where everything goes. And as you can see, the most predominant feature is raised crosswalks that connect these greenways together. So as you're walking down a greenway for a number of blocks, when you cross the street, you don't have to go up and back down. You stay at level, and the cars get to go up and down, so that it's signaled to them that they're crossing a pedestrian space or a shared space, and that the pedestrian has the priority there. So it will help us really add value to these greenways and pedestrian green streets by connecting them together in a way that helps them feel more contiguous and not broken up by the intersecting vehicular streets.
I mean, it's fortuitous. I like the fact that you guys have that in and be able to implement it from the beginning and not try to jerry-rig it in later.
Yes, although it's some of these things are a financial impact to the development team, they're cooperative and understand our shared goals here. And it is for sure less expensive to do this from the outset than to retrofit, as we're seeing in the active transportation plan process we're going through now. Coming and redoing a corner to put in a raised crosswalk involves a lot more than adding some asphalt on top of the existing asphalt. So we're excited to have this be a precedent. And another reason why Public Works is comfortable with this is that it is limited to this area and would require legislative council action to implement it anywhere else. So Brad Stapley, well concerned and hesitant, felt comfortable in beginning to try some of these strategies in a limited area in the city.
So, I'm trying to follow so there's raised crosswalks.
Correct.
But then raised crosswalks are a subsection of enhanced and protected intersection in the explanation.
Yes,
So-
saying that in those locations, a strategy you could use to enhance or protect the intersection is a raised crosswalk, but
But they
wherever
could
there is
also
an
use-
A, you have to have a raised crosswalk.
Okay. But B could be
Bulb outs, raised
bulb outs,
crosswalks.
raised crosswalks. Well, is the whole section, or does it switch to different when it's talking bicycle boulevards at intersections? Or the entire section is
So,
enhanced and protected
Enhanced and protected intersections runs to the next capitalized section, so these are all applicable to that section until you get to bicycle boulevards. That starts the next section.
Bicycle left turns is capitalized though.
Bicycle left turns, sorry, you're correct.
Okay. Then bicycle boulevards is a different thing that we don't require in any areas.
Actually, we do, they're here.
Oh, I see. So there's.
So wherever a bicycle boulevard intersects a bicycle boulevard, those are how we treat the intersections.
That's gonna be clear to someone who's trying to do this.
Good question. Hopefully, we'll.
Because I was just looking at the legend with the lines. It's just telling you what was on that street.
Right.
Not that you were gonna have to do an intersection that was from that category.
Right, that's a good question, we can clarify that.
So hybrid beacon is a subset of the bicycle boulevards.
Yeah, it,
And traffic circles? Are those bicycle boulevard related specifically?
typically, yes.
Okay. They don't have hybrid beacons that are just for pedestrians? Isn't that what we have out here on
No,
Main
that's an
Street?
RRFB.
That's an RRFB. Oh, but that's also in a subsection of bicycle boulevards. And two
I wouldn't take that too literally, it's just essentially how this explanatory section was
Okay,
organized, just to try to give it some organization.
okay.
And it was me, so I take full responsibility for any lack of clarity here.
Yeah, I think that, well, for raised crosswalks and toucan crossings, traffic signal, and RRFB or hybrid beacons, those are clear, but the enhanced protected intersections, I think that we should somehow clarify what that means. Like, what options does that mean? Or does that mean any of these
Right.
isn't enhanced or protected, so you can do whatever you want? Just something to clarify that. That's my only thing.
This is one of those cases where
It's new to us.
yes, where it's new to us, but I'm also in the position of trying to. I wish we had standards already in the city for like how we employ bulb outs,
Yeah,
or that we have perpendicular crossings or directional crossings instead of apex crossings at corners, like the ramps that are on the corner. And if you're in a wheelchair, it points you out into the middle of the intersection. Then you have to turn in
Yeah.
to ones that line up with the crosswalks, those type of things, and where they are employed and how they're used. And we don't have that yet. So we're kind of saddling this project sometimes with coming up with very fundamental regulatory elements and standards that would apply very broadly, but because we just don't have them, it's kind of getting hung on this project, and that's one place where there's still collaborative work to do. And the comment from the consultant is that these standards will encourage and ensure best practices and balance multiple modes of transportation. Any additional questions? Additional thoroughfare standards. You don't need to read through these. What they're essentially telling us is that you can put parking in a common lot. Something we just didn't figure out as we were going through the code is, what do you do when you have, because all these lot types say parking can be in a common parking area, like if you have apartment buildings. It shows that it can be on the lot, but it can be common, but we don't actually have a lot type for that. And this tells us how we can create an outlot that holds the parking. If I can go make you all dizzy again and come back to this image, we essentially had to gerrymander these lots to get the parking on them. So like this lot comes down the middle of the alley, and then this takes a little chunk here, but you can't have a driveway on the lot, so we had to have a little random what's it lot here for the driveway, and then make these really long back to here to pick up their parking, and it's just a whole lot of awkwardness. And so we came to the conclusion that, hey, we need to make these lots and then have this parking be an outlot, be a separate lot, and realized that we didn't have a really a defined way of doing that in the code. So we came up with one, and we're comfortable with it. Simply, it doesn't change anything that you will ever see on the ground. It just changes what the plat looks like, and also does a very clever thing by by allowing a lot to be reduced in depth and overall size if the parking isn't on the lot, but only by the amount to which, or so that central parking area has to be at least as big as the area you've taken off the lot. So it basically lets you take your, 250 square foot of stall with circulation or off of the lot and put it in a central parking lot, but it doesn't change the configuration at all. That plat wouldn't change. It just changes where the property lines are on the ground.
So would there be the possibility that it would create like a parking lot, like stuck off in the one corner, and everyone would have to walk back and forth to that?
No, it has to be a shared mid-block parking lot.
Okay,
It can't be a remote parking lot.
okay.
So you'd go until you get home and say, where'd you park? Oh, I parked in the A lot.
Mickey lot, Donald lot.
And it also provides an opportunity for tuck under parking and podium parking, which is parking on the ground floor. So it clarifies that can be done, but says it has to be at least 25 feet away from any street right of way. So it creates that minimum habitable first floor depth.
Oh, okay.
And that's another area where we never anticipated we'd do podium, but as UBA has decided to do more commercial, they've actually created some buildings that do have ground floor parking that that actually has like two buildings sitting on top of the podium, and then a courtyard or a green space on top of the parking garage that's accessible by stairways from the front. It's really quite a nice concept. It's just not something we anticipated a year ago. So that clarifies how that can be used, so we don't just end up with parking garage first floors. Any questions on that? This is, I think, the last. Yes, this is the last of the thoroughfare standards, and this is falls into the category of both of things we missed and things to make the development work better. When we initially didn't have a pedestrian green street in the code, and then we included one and developed application for it, but we never changed the setbacks. And there's a big difference between a house with a front porch fronting on a street with cars than fronting on a green street. So the Corkit has proposed that along pedestrian green streets that those setbacks, front setbacks, are reduced, and in the very downtown portion, so in the T5I, T6, and then at 2 feet in the T5I, that those front porches can be basically right up at the back of the right-of-way, because there's no running traffic. You already have essentially a shared front yard, so providing more private space on those lots was a positive, and also providing more, from my perspective, from an urban design viewpoint, it could create a really nice sense of place on those streets, almost like some of the European old town streets that people are so attracted to, where they're narrow and cozy, and there's people on balconies and porches, that it creates a more intimate space and really brings the life and the activity of each house close to the green street. So if people are on the porches, they're there, they're close, they're observant, they can engage in the sociability that makes these really nice places. So this is one that I'm positive about, but has a neutral recommendation.
So it's already has a minimum 40 feet
Yes,
with
you
the
can't-
green street.
You can't make the green streets any narrower.
So it's either 40 feet to 40 feet or 40
Plus,
for
and in the
or 40.
areas, like in the single family detached and the town, kind of the less dense areas, it's still 12 feet, which is actually really generous. If you go to a lot of the shared mid-block streets in Salt Lake, the bungalow courts, they have
not
not that far apart.
So these recommended
64 feet.
minimums, we don't have, or are these a change from what we already have, or do
Yes,
we not
these
have
are
anything?
changes. So what we've done is, instead of going to every single lot type and putting another column in the table saying these are your setbacks when you're on a green street, as opposed to your normal setbacks, we've just come into the green street and said, when you're on a green street, you can have these setbacks. So we could go to, for example, let's come over to the PDF and go to here, village house lot type.
Uh-huh.
So the setback, the building at street is a 15-foot minimum for this, but this would allow it to be 12.
Okay. And this is, just to make sure I'm keeping up, the green streets are the ones where it's an interior, it's not vehicular traffic in between?
They are these streets.
We have bicycle traffic, possibly.
All these streets that are, all these long green rectangles,
Uh-huh.
those are pedestrian green streets. This one actually, that's kind of confusing. Let me go to the standards, sorry. These are all the pedestrian green streets.
And what makes a green street different from a regular street?
It looks like this. It doesn't have any cars on it.
Okay.
It's just greenway and sidewalks,
No vehicular traffic.
and potentially pickleball courts and playgrounds. And
I mean, that'd be sad. A pickleball instead of cars.
But there can be bicycles and scooters.
yes, these have no vehicular traffic, so no posted speed or design speed. They're 40 feet minimum, and they have at least 2 5-foot sidewalks with 6-foot advised.
Okay.
And what we're doing here is we're reducing
these front setbacks incrementally. And instead of, again, going to each lot type, like here's the tiny cottage, and saying front zone and putting building at Green Street and putting 12 in there, we're just on the Green Street page listing all of them. It's really a editing efficiency move. But if you feel better about us adding a row on each of these to show what the Green Street setback is, along with these, with all the other setbacks, we can do that too.
So you're taking away potentially front yard space and moving it into a common area?
No, we're not moving it into a common area. We're just, the property line doesn't move.
Uh-huh.
We're just moving the house close, the building closer to the property line, the front property line.
So you potentially have more in the back?
You could have more in the back.
Okay.
Yes.
That's
To the road or to the green space?
Closer to the green space, which is the
common people.
the green, the non-vehicle road, the walking road.
Pedestrian.
Okay.
Yes.
And most of these changes are just 2 or 3 feet?
Correct. If we go down to, let's say, these Main Street back-to-back cluster lot types are a 4 feet minimum, and in the T5, they would be 2 feet, and then in T5I and T6, they would go to 0 feet. So it would be a
Right.
maximum 4 foot reduction.
Right on it.
And those types of homes, what type of homes are we putting that with a 0 foot?
So anything that you can build in the dense T5I, T5, and T6 areas. So those are, if we go back to this table, I occasionally feel like I'm comfortable with where everything is in this document, and then
It's just such a long
you put me on the
document.
spot. Okay, here we go.
There we
The
go.
condensed version is 128.
So in the T5, it goes everything from a cottage up to mixed-use apartment buildings. And then,
Suburban mansions.
which is where, no village houses, no suburban mansion, suburban house, side drive house, village house, any of those. And then once you get up to the T6 and T5I, you lose.
We have 2 categories that are called cottages? Did I say
We have multiple.
4 is a cottage?
There's a
and 5 is
compact cottage. There's a.
Main Street.
But they're just called it was just cottage and cottage. That's confusing.
Where is that?
Permitted lot type, in T3, it says number 4 cottage, but then in T5, it says number 5 cottage.
Oh, you
And they're
actually just
just-
found a
In
typographical.
T4, it's cottage.
Yeah,
Yeah, you found a typo.
T4 and T5. Are we
That
missing
sh-
something?
No, that should be. Let's go see what it actually is. The problem, these are just things that were perpetuated through the drafting because we kept moving stuff around.
Yeah.
So a cottage is 5. So we added this village house lot type, so we need to go make that edit.
Wait, but village house was a different number, wasn't it? Village house, that says it's number 4. What's it say number 3 is? It says
Oh,
number
and
3
see,
is
here we
village
have
house.
Suburban house and side drive house both
Oh,
listed as
both
2.
at number 2.
So
That's
we need to
not
go
right.
through and make sure this tidy that up again. Thanks for catching that.
When you reviewing my business contracts.
Well, no, because this is my second time looking at this. Should have found it the first time.
Any additional questions on that?
Do we need to include correcting those in this motion, or is that something you can
Those are
do?
really just typographical.
Typographical.
corrections,
So we don't
but-
have to worry about it.
Non-legislative. Okay.
So now, an hour and 45 minutes into it, we get to the tricky one. This is the one we need all your brain power for. So I'm going to walk you through it first, and you're going to scratch your head and say, what are you trying to do? And then I'm going to show you what we're doing.
Doesn't that apply to the last hour and 45
This
minutes?
isn't in the packet.
I was gonna say, it's not here, correct?
Yeah, the packet has,
Yeah, we have no idea
has
what this is.
parking stuff duplicated, but we don't have these things
Yeah.
in the packet.
I couldn't
Which
figure out
things in the
why we
process?
had more parking pages.
the
but we
process?
The
do.
printed packet,
Okay.
but I feel like I read it.
It's the process part.
No,
I read this in the packet that we were emailed. That's the duplicate.
Yeah, this was in the email too. In the email, there was the duplication of parking stuff.
Yeah.
I was like going back and forth,
Crazy.
like, why is it, is there a difference here?
Yeah,
What are you
I don't know. That's why I asked. Is this all new? Oh, up at the
Which
front,
five?
before that, okay.
yeah, those are exhibits. And I may have not put the exhibits together properly, and I made that PDF, so.
There you go, splicing stuff again.
The current code says that you can move units around between blocks and areas within the same transect, so the same zone, on the same application.
Okay,
UBA has 500 units and 130,000 square feet of commercial. They aren't ready to pull the trigger on doing full civil engineering on 500 units and a Walmart worth of commercial. And so you'll see how the numbers are really working, but we've proposed a change and staff drafted this, so any errors or omissions are again entirely on our ledger. So we'll leave it the same in that density shall be calculated per application per transect, but now we're adding a provision in the southern part, so the part that UBA controls, that 2732 acres on the southern part, and that has its own section in the regulating plan. So this section, this
Yeah.
is the southern part. In the southern part, up to 15% of the maximum permitted yield of units in any phase or any application can be carried forward or sent to a future receiving phase within the southern part, subject to the following conditions: that they have to be identified and located when they are sent. So when they brought in their initial application, they not only have a full site plan with engineering for phase one, they have an overall 32-acre plan saying this is where all the units are and how they work by block, so that we know where they end up.
But that could change?
No, so they have to identify that,
Developers come in and do it, is what we worried about.
and then they have to be utilized on an application for the receiving phase within 5 years from approval of the preliminary plan for the sending phase. So you can't just leave them out there forever. You have to use them in 5 years, and you have to use them where you said you were going to use them.
Oh, okay.
And no block into which units are carried forward can exceed its maximum permitted unit count by more than 15%. So any block you draw a line around can't exceed the density by more than 15%. And the total unit
And-
count,
But you would be bulking up that section's density because in another section, it's gonna be less dense,
correct,
but in the future.
in the future. So, but the last provision is that, or the second to last provision is that the total unit count for the southern part can't exceed the units they had to begin with. So they don't get any more units. We're just moving them around a little bit.
We're just letting them, like,
Pause on developing them.
Yes.
develop them in chunks, but we don't have to have them.
If
They don't have
they
to-
don't give them
they
up.
don't have
Essentially,
to.
the way it's written right now, they've submitted a phase one plan to us, and it is short. I'll show you the table. So many units, because their next phase is a separate application.
They can front load them.
They would
or
be
not
out those
front load
units.
it.
They'd essentially be, however many units that is, they'd have to just lose them, and the project will lose those
Because
units.
they're not on the same
Because they're not in the same application.
But
uh,
this way we'll let them we'll let them
As
either
long as we have the
front load
overall plan.
15% or push off 15%. Both ways?
That's a really good question. Why don't you call me when I'm thinking of these things? Yeah.
Less upfront?
This direction doesn't hurt the cities.
Yes, this is a less upfront, and I'll show you that.
Yeah,
here.
the other direction is the one I'm worried about.
Yes, me too.
Front loading so that we don't end up with
And this-
something like we already have over there, where
Right,
it
where
was
they built the
supposed to
apartments
have
and they never have built
commercial
anything else.
and nothing, but
Right.
has ever
So
happened
this
with
doesn't contemplate that. You can only send, and you can only receive ones you've previously sent. You can't grab something from a future phase.
So you can't front load.
You
You can
can't front load.
only conserve
Yes.
things for the future.
Yes. You can only
Okay.
save your treats for later. You can't eat tomorrow's treats today.
Yeah.
As a discussion we have many times. Well, what if I don't play tomorrow?
And
Talk to me about that tomorrow, son.
and either way, well, it's not. It's just one way, and they have to do the rest of it within 5 years.
Right.
Or they do lose it.
Or they lose it.
Okay.
But just to, I want to make sure I'm clear on this too. It's only one way. They can't front end load,
Only
just
one way.
back end
They
load.
can only send.
Okay.
And you can only
That's
add,
clear
you can
enough.
only increase the density on a block as if you've received them from somewhere else that has already been approved.
Yeah. So you can build less without losing the
The
extra bit.
additional.
And I'll explain why they want to do that here in just a second. And the last provision is that,
Hold on, there is something that says you are going to come back and do the stuff that you are offloading till later. You're not skipping around it.
You have to do it within
You're
5
losing it
years.
After 5
Is,
years.
is the 5 years in the statute?
yes,
Okay.
right here,
It's in there. You said it.
A, and then utilized on an application for the receiving phase within 5 years from the approval
There it
of the
is.
preliminary plan for the sending phase.
I was looking for the number 5.
But
Find it.
If I would have written
but
the
you
5,
did
Genevieve
you
would have
when you
corrected
talked
my
about
Been all over this.
when you talked about it, you said that they have to do it in the place that they said they were going to do it.
Yeah, so they
But
have
this
to.
doesn't say that.
It
or
does.
does it say in a different
The
section?
carried forward units must be identified and located on an overall unit plan included with the preliminary plan
Ah,
application
okay.
for the sending phase.
Okay, and then okay. I
Yes.
see.
So all aspects of this are totally transparent, approved, planned for, no
Upfront.
surprises later.
Yes.
Okay.
They just don't have to actually apply for them right then.
They don't have to give us a preliminary application, but they do have to give us at least a
The-
drawing saying this is where this is where we're sending them.
Yeah.
And the last is that all the other requirements have to be met by the sending and receiving phases. You can't say, "Oh, we've got more units here, but we can't fit the parking, so we want a parking reduction." No, this only applies to moving the units around. It doesn't give you breaks on anything else. And so we recommend
Meaning if they have less units, they only have to build the parking for the units that they build, right?
right. So I'm saying like if they pushed units onto a future
parking
block
goes
and then
with it.
said, "Oh, we can't quite fit these, but we don't want to lose our units." We're like, "Well, you still have to meet your setbacks and your parking and everything else."
Okay.
And remember how I said I was supposed to go? I forgot. I was like, "That's why my phone buzzing." Sorry.
You need to be done with this. is what
Yeah,
you're
well,
saying.
Discussion.
somebody else knows how to play the piano. The drawing on the left is all of phase 1. You draw a box around this and do the math for units over area. It is compliant. You draw a box around phase 1. It has fewer units, but this is the key. I've kind of buried the lead here. It has more commercial. There's as much commercial essentially in phase 1 as was required for this entire project. And the reason is this southeast corner is really the best place for office space and other types of uses because it's closest to the freeway, it has visibility, It has easy access. You don't have to drive through the project to get to it. You can get directly in and out. And so it makes sense to have it here where they really wouldn't be able to, or they don't feel that it's viable to put commercial farther back into the project or those type of uses. So again, the compliant is on the left, and on the right shows by block which blocks go down and which blocks are up. Just so you can, and this may look like a lot of pluses, but I've got and the ones that don't have anything on them stay even. But this next page table shows you for each block the maximum number of units permitted, what they are showing, and what what the net is. And when that says incremental net like that, we round up anyway, so that's noise. But you see in the blocks 7A and 7B down here that they are net 20 units short. But that when you do all of this math, it still comes down here to 0, and they're at 496, which is 19 units less than the 515 maximum they were that the plan provided for.
Mm-hmm.
So they're already less. It still equals the same. There is one here that exceeds that 15%, and so they essentially have to lose a unit and a half on block 6B because it exceeds the 15% maximum increase. But otherwise it nets out to 0. But the big thing is that this allows them to give us more of what we want, which is we had 67,000 square feet of required commercial. In phase 1, they're giving us almost 30,000 more square feet of ground floor commercial, which will really make it a great place than we asked for. And we're getting a net 55,000 square feet of additional commercial over the required minimum. And we felt very excited about having an even better balance between employment, amenities, shopping, daily services, those type of things, and residences, that it was really a no-brainer after we got our heads around how it worked to allow the residential units to move around in the southern part, because it's all controlled by the same entity. It doesn't, no more units are created out of thin air. Everything stays even as long as that rectangle is drawn around the whole project.
So Josh, just to be clear, that 55,000 is additional?
Yes, this net commercial is, they're required to put 67,000 and they're providing 122. So we
Okay.
have 55,000 more than the minimum.
And they're still fitting the same number of
They're
houses?
still fitting the
Wow.
496 units. Yeah. That's where the parking structures and the podium parking and other kind of things come in.
Got it, okay.
Is it 15% that they can push, or just 15%
They
that can be received?
They can push 15% out of any phase,
And then-
and they can take as
They-
much as they want in any other phase, but they can't increase the, they can't go over their density calculation by more than 15%.
okay,
So it's a different 15 on
and it's 15% of the application or the transact
block.
of the block.
Can you-
Okay.
Can you pop back to that block screen? So 6B, 5, and 3 are the ones that go up the highest, right? And 6B is up 20%, 3 is up, I think it's 50.
So one of those blocks looked like it was losing, or it was like gonna be short 24%. So they can only push 15% off to the next, right? Looks like 7A looks
Yeah.
like it's a negative percent units,
point.
24.9.
Yeah, I think it's application on the sending side. Oh, sorry.
It's application,
Oh.
yeah.
Phase 1 can only send 15%.
To the next, yeah. So it's in that, between all of the blocks in that application.
Yeah, up to 15% of the
Got it.
maximum permitted units with any development phase, but you can't exceed any single block can't exceed its maximum permitted unit count by more than 15%.
Okay, so that's why
on the
you
receiving
can,
side.
you can be losing less.
You can be losing more on a per block
losing
basis.
more per block, but you can't gain more per block
Right,
than 15%.
correct.
Okay.
So the sending is based on phase, the receiving is based on per block. And again, for clarity, the first phase encompasses all of the southeast, so all of 7A, 7B, 7C, and then part of 6B and 6C.
So losing a large percentage.
And so that when you distribute it across all of that, we'd come and do the math for the area, the net developable acreage within that first application. And there's a big table in the application that does this. It says there are this many acres in this application. We're taking this many units out. It's 15% or less of the total density we could get off of that developable acreage. And then we also have this sheet showing us what the impact is to the receiving blocks.
What if you have 15.1% and it's 5 units? Are
Our-
you going to lose a whole unit?
No, our code generally rounds up and down for
Okay.
fractional numbers.
Okay.
So it's, yeah. Could have shown that in a more simple way. So that one again, even though it took us quite a while from staff and administration and working with the mayor to keep everyone in the loop, we did come to a point where we're all comfortable with this, and it's a recommendation across the board for approval on this. So don't feel bad if you're still scratching your head. We've only just barely figured it out.
This is approval is for the entire thing that we've talked about tonight, not split into sections. It's just one motion, right?
It is one motion, but
There's
we could
couple-
scratch out and add. So this is your summary here.
Yep.
So we can scratch out, add, as long as somebody's written it down on a sheet that we have, and it's clear in the motion.
Right. My plan for going through this was to go through each individual one and take any, if anyone wants to remove anything, change anything, we'll make a note of that and then make one motion that includes everything that we've
Yeah.
discussed related to each one.
Yeah.
So, that was my plan.
Yeah, so that
Good plan.
concludes my presentation. I'm sorry I couldn't come up with more to say.
It's very sad when there's not more to say. Do we have any questions for Josh before we move to developers?
No, but I have a question for
Do you need a recess?
Genevieve, and I may need a recess soon. I drank this whole bottle, and maybe for Liz as well. The 14 foot wide. If this horse has not been beaten enough.
No.
When I saw when you recognized it was 14 wide, you said, "Oh, I made my decision." Why were you so? I'm trying to get somebody to tell me why this is a bad idea, other than I don't like 14 feet wide.
Do you want to wait until we get to the discussion on the items?
Oh, is that what happens next?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll
Great.
still do
Yep, I'll wait.
Okay. So at this point, we'd invite the applicant to come up, and if there's anything you'd like to add to what's already been presented, you're welcome to do so.
I would like to officially just update you on the relationship with the city and us as the developers who have come into this project together. And more importantly, I just want to commend the report you've received today was a lot of information that's been going around for a long time. And just the ability to convey that in an hour and a half or 2 hours is, I think, substantially an evidence of your staff and what you're working with. So I just wanted to thank that component to the city. I just want y'all to understand that we feel like sometimes you want to get up here and say, well, gosh, I want this or I need this. The point is this has all been done together, like the whole thing. So it's really been multiple facets of experts and professionals from city all the way to planners urbanists to us, who have all kind of respectfully honored each person's place coming into the table. And I think from what you've seen, we've understood what Springville wants through the staff and through what we feel we've been given as our mandate of direction or intent. And we've kind of gone a few of these things where we're doing, raised passing, the whole thoroughfare standards that the city brought as a regulation at the end is going to add cost. It's going to add some substantial, planning and design around what we're doing primarily in our area. But at the same time, we've all collectively feel it's going to be the thing that brings us to the collective intent that everyone's after. And I think we will have substantial benefit from it being that type of a product in the end. So we've just enjoyed going through those iterations of discussions, and that's really the main thing. I don't have any. I mean, most of what you've had presented to you today is the consideration of all of our inputs, and I think it's been presented candidly the way we would like it to have been presented. So I work with a lot of cities, and probably 9 right now that I'm involved with around the state, from St. George to North Ogden, and this has been one of the most enjoyable, last few months of going towards a big project together with a group, and so I hope we can see it through the end. So that's really all I have specific. Is there any specific question about any of them that you may have that you've been presented tonight?
Does anybody have any questions? Okay.
I mean, I feel like this amendment process, as we find other things going through this size of a project, we come back to you, we'll be as prepared, and we'll just use this as a communication back and forth to the community as to where we're headed, and we'll all go there together. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Do we have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Public hearing is not open, and we'd invite anyone from the public or the city council or anyone to come up.
My name is Liz Crandall. And thank you for letting me take a minute. And thank you for coming, and thank you for all the work that everyone has done to make these communities beautiful and a place where people want to live and enjoy life.
Liz? Sorry, not interrupt. But it's helpful for me to know right now, are you speaking as council member Liz Crandall or as community member Liz Crandall?
At this point, I don't know if there's a difference right now. Well, if I were to speak as community, Liz Crandall, I would probably be complaining about the density, but understanding density a little bit better as a city council member.
Because if she speaks as a city council member, does that mean she's giving direction?
So which should I speak of?
That's
Okay, so maybe, okay, gotcha. Okay, I will speak as a citizen then. Okay, as the public. And density is concerning. But that being said, my
It's
only
already been
concern.
approved, right?
Yes, it has. So it's already been approved, but I guess my concern would be is just the 14, reducing from 20 feet to 14 feet. Just as, as people can live comfortably in a space, I think that that's very small, especially if it's from wall, like outside wall, which I think more of the end of the discussion, we were talking about from outside to outside. Okay, so as a member of the public, I think that's a little small. Maybe I just should not even speak, and I will wait for another.
We still welcome
Time.
your feedback. We've had
Okay.
Mayor Packer come up too.
All right, I will just
Yeah,
wait because maybe I cannot speak as a member of the public anymore. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Not seeing any other members of the public and not knowing of any way for them to communicate remotely, do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved. Oh, you can take it, Mike.
First, second?
Seconded.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, at this point, we can have some discussion amongst commissioners. I think I've already explained how I plan to move through this. So right now, let's just have general discussion if there's any concerns, whatever, and then I will go through each specific one and ask if anyone wants to remove or change any of the items, so we know what to include in the motion. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So general discussion, anything that anyone would like to bring up before we go through the items?
Not in just general, no.
Okay. All right, and then in preparation for motions, on item number 1, I'm just looking at the table, the green and orange table.
Yep.
Is there any feedback on that? Anybody had any concerns, or anyone who would want to remove that from consideration?
Not
Or
for
making
me.
changes to it?
To this sheet?
To item number
On-
1?
on it.
Item number
Block
1,
type
no,
one.
yeah, no.
Okay. Item number 2, any changes or deletions there?
Not for me.
Not for me either.
3?
I'm okay with approving it. I mean, since it's
And two,
left
I
at
would change it
neutral,
to green.
Mm-hmm.
I would,
Agreed.
Number 4?
Yeah.
number 4, I'm
I just
down
have-
with
I
staying.
have questions, I'm trying to get somebody to play the devil's
So-
advocate.
Okay, so I live in a small house and our bedroom is 12 feet wide. It is small. That doesn't even include space for the closet, and we don't have enough space in the closet because it's so small. And it's something that I have to continually go through with my husband because he wants to move so bad because there's not enough room for us to have a king-size bed
Mm-hmm.
and side tables without him having to scooch along the wall to get around the bed. And so it's just having it something that would be in essence 12 feet wide inside. And if it's 4 stories, then there's got to be a stairwell at some point in there. And I know that it can be how deep? Like 40 feet deep, or what was it on the, was 60? Which is quite deep. And I know that there's TV shows about super skinny houses, like that Spite House in
Chicago, you got a bunch in
No, no.
Chicago.
Oh, I don't know. There's a Spite House in San Francisco that's only 8 feet wide or something ridiculous. I don't want Springville to have a housing type that puts us on a show for being crazy. And it's just not livable space when it's that narrow. And 4 floors of that narrow, it just doesn't seem, it just seems like even if there are people that would buy that or rent that, I feel like,
Is that what you're concerned
They
about
shouldn't-
overuse is?
yeah, if I feel like in the situation that things are now, people might just take something because that's what's there.
That's the only thing available they can
That's
get
the only
into.
thing that's available. If that's what they're building, and that's what's there, then people will rent it, but they won't be happy and they'll have constant fights with their husband about how they want to move because they don't like how narrow the house is. And there's nowhere to put their suits and that kind of a thing. So that's why
The closet's a whole
the,
floor on a
the
different level.
closets,
Go upstairs to the closet.
yeah, which is what we have to do. Our closet is a whole nother room in the
Yeah,
house.
yeah, yeah.
So it's just one of those things. And there's only 2 of us that live in my house. If you sit there and you put a whole family, with multiple kids in a house that narrow, I think that it happens because it has to in places, but I don't think that Springville and Lakeside is a situation where you are building inside a city that's already built up and you're trying to squeeze in an apartment, where there wouldn't normally be one. I think it's a unnecessary reduction in livable space. That's my thought.
I think the whole community is already a fairly compact community, and this is just taking it and making it even more compact than we already are. I don't
Josh?
think that's
No, it
gonna-
doesn't increase density,
I
it
like the
does
I like
compact
the
it.
real life example you gave.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not, I've got a concern about it, beside what Genevieve is saying. And I appreciate her concept, but have any of you ever seen a 14-foot building?
That's what I was just gonna say.
Now, first of all, does this mean that if they're not 20 feet wide, then will they not be connected? I mean, the example that we saw on there showed those side by side or whatever.
Yeah, they'd still be connected because
attached.
the lots, the inside, because they're a townhome, the inside side yard setback is 0, so they're attached. So you could have 14-foot row homes next to each other.
But I understand they could be next to each other, but with the size of the lot, does that mean we're gonna add some additional units?
No,
No.
because you can't.
Well, then if you compact all those together, you're just gonna have a lot of green space.
Yeah, that's what
on
we were
either
saying
side.
earlier.
You could, or you may have
Expansive.
larger lots
Or you
for
could have a
another.
larger,
You can make a cottage wider.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, well, I don't have a serious problem with it, but my grandson owns a home up in Lehigh, and I'm sure that it's a 20-footer, but they're standalone,
Yeah.
but they're 3-story high. And they look really weird to me.
See, I have
I've-
yet to be in a car with anyone driving where you see those
Yeah.
20-foot or 14 or whatever that people don't go, that is terribly ugly.
But since you're saying that they're all gonna be connected,
I've
I don't
seen
have,
the ones in
I don't think
Daybreak,
that would
I
look
think.
as strange, but I still,
And
agree
the
with
They
ones
do
in-
Genevieve.
look strange.
The ones
Yeah.
in
They do look
Daybreak
As
that
a
I
row
think
house,
I've
can see
seen.
how that would blend it and soften the appearance of it, because you can't quite tell unless
that's
it's
the thing.
distinguished in the design standards.
The ones that I've seen in Daybreak, you couldn't tell how wide each one really was because it was just like one block, and there was doorways,
Row
you
houses.
know, and it was just like, but they were really tall, and there was a rooftop thing on them, and not all the doorways were on the same face, you know, they were kind of like different sides of the building. But I just saw them from the outside. I couldn't see them inside. So they don't necessarily look crazy from the outside because they made them so that you couldn't tell that they were so skinny. But it doesn't change the fact that when you actually get inside, that's what it's gonna be.
but my reaction to that is, the concept is to make something more affordable, and I agree that we definitely need more affordable housing. On the other hand, if a person wants to buy one that is that narrow,
Yeah, but these aren't
It's up to
people
them.
that are like, oh, I'm gonna order that.
No,
It's
what's
already
available.
exists and it's
Yeah.
what's available. I mean, there are people in New York City that live in like the tiniest little things because that's the only thing that's available
Or that they can afford.
or that they can afford.
And I think that's the point of this.
But then
this
again,
conversation.
then they're New York is always having to fight to make sure that they're not living in these like half apartment things and whatnot because the landlords will do things that are against code because they know people will accept it. But that's not an acceptable living standard. And I'm not saying that these are the same as these tenement situations.
Well, it's okay to give it.
But it's that concept that, yes, would be more affordable. I say more affordable because I don't really trust even something like that to be affordable, but it would be something that people would accept when it's,
It would be
not-
less unaffordable, is what you're trying to say.
Right. I mean, it's true that we have zero control over the market. We
Yeah.
have control over what we are trying to make available within the market, and we're hoping that some products are more affordable than other products, but we're not the ones selling them, pricing them, et cetera.
Yeah.
Just about any of these products that we have either proposed here or within the city, you can find somebody who wants just about anything. There will be somebody who really loves a tiny house. I don't. There's somebody who loves a huge house.
Yeah.
That might be more me, you know. But if we're looking to what we think our community is like, or what we want our community to be like, I think that's more of a guiding standard for whether or not we do item forward, rather than whether or not we think anybody would like it.
Yeah.
Because you could find somebody who would. But I'm personally not in favor of it. I'd rather we didn't go quite that narrow.
I'm also in that opinion.
Okay, so we'll just make a note that for item 4, we need to include in the motion to deny that one, and we can vote on it separately if anybody is in favor of that one. Is anyone in favor of that one? Okay, then we don't need to vote on that one separately.
No, you guys did a good job.
Well, and I'm actually just taking notes under each of these 3 columns on the recommended motion section as to what ones you are favorable for, and then you can essentially just use this as the motion, and you could just even read down it if you wanted.
Okay,
You could say for lot type amendments, we are in favor of 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, whatever,
okay,
and then handle it with one motion, but clearly delineate which ones you're giving a thumbs up to, and then we can know that you're not recommending the other ones.
you've got a key in front of you. Okay. Number 5, any concerns with number 5?
Not for me.
6,
Not for me.
No.
Not here.
7?
Not for me.
Okay, under parking lot design and thoroughfare standards, any concerns with number 1
No.
or 2? 3?
Nope.
4?
Let me just check. I had a circle. Oh, no, I had those questions. No,
Okay,
no concerns for me.
all right. And process, that was a interesting one. Do we need anything clarified on there, or does anybody have any concerns or changes there?
No, I had a lot of concerns before, but now I don't.
Good job,
Okay.
Josh.
And I guess my only question would be, with all of the questions that you had,
Oh.
have we
Do we
written
need to
it
resolve anything?
appropriately so that we answer those questions? Like,
Oh,
is that
that's a
gonna-
good
is that gonna be
question.
someone reading it, or a developer, or whoever interprets it how they choose to interpret it?
Yeah. Is it well drafted?
So I would just say,
That's
let's
a
look at
really
the
good,
draft.
okay, that's a good point.
Okay,
Let's
so
look at the
maybe
draft.
in our motion include something to direct
We'll go over it again.
for,
Density shall be
Application.
Staff
calculated
and,
per
and legal to work
application
together
per
to-
transact.
Okay.
Southern part.
more like, we're approving the idea of it with any clarification or modifications necessary by staff.
We need to do more of trying to break things before we
Oh.
adopt them.
This is a question,
for sure.
this is a question on the process. It says, it says density shall be calculated per application per transact. In the southern part, up to 15% of the maximum permitted yield of units within a development may be carried forward to future phases within the southern part. So is this section, that makes it seem like this section is only for the southern part.
It is only for the southern part.
The rest of the areas won't have this.
Won't, because we don't want separate, like we've got somebody taking 20 acres here, or somebody taking 14 acres here. We don't want people
All over.
creating this chaos of trying to horse trade units around and say, oh, well, I'm going to take some extra ones because somebody's going to build less later, and then that person comes and says, hey, where's my units?
Is that,
So this is,
has John looked at this, is that like gonna be a possible
Oh, yeah,
legal problem in the
no,
future?
not at all. We just, it's clear what we're doing. We just say it's just for the southern
It's
part.
not saying that but if someone's like, well, you did it for the southern part, why aren't you doing it for us?
They'd have to
It's
come in and go
arbitrary.
through the same process.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
That's good.
all right, carry forward.
I think that front end will be nice for the representation of the city too, rather than just jumping into apartments or whatever.
And we feel it sets a good starting point to have a good chunk of commercial in that first phase.
Open it up with that.
I think it does. Yeah.
You're comfortable with where it is?
Yeah, I'm
At least as
comfortable.
far as a motion's concerned.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Then it appears that our motion would be that we are approving all except for lot type number 4. And does that sound about right?
You want me to make a motion?
Sure.
I move to, oh wait, where's the language?
You
Yeah.
can use-
Proposed
you can
more-
just use
I
lot
don't
Want me to
types.
do it?
You just had to make up your own.
Anyway, I move that we accept the proposed amendments of lot type 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, parking lot design 1, 2, 3, and 4, and process 1, as described.
Second.
Okay.
Do we need to put the negative in there as well? Is that a second?
She
Oh,
said
I just said
accept.
we would approve, we would deny lot type 4.
Did you say that part? The
No.
We
deny?
didn't
I
say
did
the
not.
deny part.
You didn't say that
I
part.
didn't, I just did
Yeah.
though.
Does
Would
that
you like
need
to
be the
make a
same?
friendly amendment to her motion to say
I don't
deny
care if
that?
it's a second amendment or not, or second motion or not.
It was implied in my motion, but,
Okay.
I'll
Oh,
se-
we
I'll
can-
s- I'll
we can
second it.
clarify. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Then that passes as moved with accepting number 4. Okay. And that takes care of our legislative session. There are no other items on our agenda tonight. Do we have any information from staff before we adjourn?
No, I think you've done your time.
Excellent. Thank you for preparing the novel.
I'm not sure we closed the
No,
legislative
we haven't
session
yet.
ever, but
No, we didn't, but when we adjourn, it's definitely closed. Actually, we did because
We
we said
closed
there wasn't
the,
anybody out
we
there.
closed the public hearing, and that's what we had to close.
Uh-huh. Yep.
But now I move that we close the meeting.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned.
Unless you had more. You didn't have more, did you?
No.
No, okay.
No.
All of a sudden I was like, oh, wait.
Yeah, I did.
You know, the other thought that occurred to me is
Or I was about to.
Uh-huh.
is
I was thinking it.
they charge them.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I say, supposedly affordable. I move to adjourn. And I don't know who, oh, and Ann seconded.
I thirded it.
So Commissioner Baker moved to adjourn.
All in favor.
Commissioner Anderson
Yeah, I mean, you just can't.
seconded.